Why do hair and nails keep growing after death? What a macabre question. It's a really good one and it'll be saved for the end of this video. But hold on, don't leave yet because there are several other great questions like this one here. Would it be possible to make a machine that removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and turns it into matter? Carbon dioxide is one of the main contributors to the greenhouse effect, which causes our planet to heat up, global warming. So yes, it would be really great if we had a machine that could capture carbon dioxide and somehow turn that gas into something we could use, right? Into some kind of fuel or construction material or something, who knows, maybe even furniture. It would be even better if this machine could remove only the carbon and give back the oxygen, right? Because carbon dioxide is CO2. If we could take just the C and return the O2, it would be a machine that generates oxygen from carbon dioxide. It would be like the greatest invention of all time, and actually it already exists. The name of the invention is tree in this case. What makes a tree grow? When we look at the trunk of a big, majestic tree, where did the matter that formed that trunk come from? Did it come from the ground? No, it came from the air. For plants to get energy, they do photosynthesis. Maybe you learned this at school, but let's remember, photosynthesis is when plants take carbon dioxide and water. This water comes from the ground, but not exactly from the soil itself. It's the ground moisture. It takes carbon dioxide and water, and with energy from sunlight. It turns that carbon dioxide into energy for itself, into a molecule called glucose, which is a type of sugar, Hans, and releases oxygen. So how crazy is that? The tree absorbs carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. And to create wood, to form its physical structure, it uses those glucose molecules. And it transforms them into other things, and including wood, which is a super useful material for us to use as fuel to make furniture in construction. Here on Manual do Mundo, you'll notice almost everything around me is made of wood. This wouldn't be a perfect cycle. Perfect for us, because the tree also breathes like we do. Also, when the tree dies and falls to the ground, it decomposes, and part of that carbon dioxide it captured ends up going back into the air. But either way, it's a really cool way to look at wood. Because you might have thought, hey, Ibere, everything's made of wood. Does that mean a bunch of trees were cut down to build that set behind you? It's true, several trees were cut down, but everything you see behind me is either pine or eucalyptus, two species we plant specifically to harvest later. No forests were destroyed to build this. Okay, at some point in history, someone did destroy the first forest to make the plantation, but it's a type of tree farming we can plant and harvest, without destroying native forests. But in summary, all the carbon in wood came from the carbon dioxide in the air. Wood is a very important renewable material, very cool to use, especially because if you toss it on the ground, it's biodegradable and returns to nature with no problem. And the second thing is that sometimes we keep trying to create revolutionary technology to do something crazy. But in the end, it was simpler. We just needed to plant more trees and cut fewer trees from nature. What's your favorite TV series? Send a shout out, a hug for you, João. There's a really cool show where a guy visits various places showing how things are made. Like, I've seen him inside a nuclear plant, inside a hydroelectric plant, showing how money is made, showing how a wind turbine works. In this case, it's the Bora Ver or Let's See series from Manual do Mundo. I don't think it counts, but it's my favorite to produce. As for TV series, I think the one I liked the most was Breaking Bad. First, because it mixes all the science stuff we talk about on Manual do Mundo, and it's a very well-written series. The plot is great, the story is amazing, and the characters are complex. Like the chemistry teacher, our poor guy has cancer, but at the same time, he's totally evil, becoming a drug producer and dealer. I like shows where things aren't obvious, where characters aren't so simple. I think Breaking Bad is a great example of that. Was it the birth of your daughters that motivated you to get in shape? Get in shape is a phrase I didn't know, but I imagine it means exercising and getting fit. Probably, right? Let me tell you something important. Maybe the most important thing I'll say in this video, okay? When my dad was 39 years old, I was 11, and he had a cerebral ischemia. A vein or artery, I don't know which, got clogged in his head, and his brain went without blood for a few seconds. He got really sick because of that. He was hospitalized, stayed a while, and when he got out, he wasn't 100%. He had vertigo that bothered him for many years. He often said there were things he could do before that he never could again. My dad's alive, he's okay, but that was a serious thing that happened to him at the time. He was still very young. 39 isn't an age where that kind of thing should happen. When Helena was born, I was really out of shape. I didn't exercise at all, ate whatever I saw in front of me, and on a trip with Mari, after lifting Helena in and out of the car so many times, my back totally locked up. Then I realized two things. First, my body wasn't strong enough to take care of my own daughter. And second, if I didn't take care of myself, maybe in a few years I'd have the same problem as my dad. And then my daughter might be left without a father. That was in 2018, before my second daughter, Melissa, was born. So I decided I'd exercise no matter what. It became the most important thing in my life, because if I didn't take care of my body, nothing else would work. There would come a point when everything would go wrong. I wouldn't even be able to record videos properly. That was already happening. For example, in Borave, Let's Go, my favorite series to film, by the end of the day, I was totally exhausted. Because sometimes we record for 12 hours non-stop, rushing, full speed, and you need to be physically fit for that. So I started running and doing strength training, not in an athletic way, like to be a pro runner or super buff. The idea was just to be strong enough to handle the daily grind. And that made a big difference. I've run 2 San Silvestre races since then, and joined many 10-kilometer runs. I don't have many strength problems. When we finish filming Borave, I'm sometimes physically tired. But I've still got the energy to shoot one more. I'll tell you, it's not easy. First of all, running causes a bunch of small injuries. I've had knee issues, shin problems, occasional back pain. Now I need to get surgery to fix a tendon here that tore in my shoulder. I'll probably need to take a few days off filming and everything. I'm not exercising as intensely as I was earlier this year. But I know the quality of my life in the future depends on how much exercise I'm doing now. So working out is kind of a health insurance policy for when I get older. And it would be great if everyone did that. There'd be way fewer people in hospitals, way fewer health problems. Channel member question here. There's always a little question for the members. Why is space dark, even with stars like the sun shining? At first glance, we might think it's because many stars are too far away and their light gets weak before it gets here. So we can't see them, but that's not really how it works. This question might sound silly, but it's way more complex than it looks. Several scientists spent centuries thinking about this, until they concluded that the fact the universe is dark proves that it isn't infinite. Just so you know, the number of stars we estimate in the universe is 1 followed by 24 zeros. Many people compare it to the number of grains of sand on all the world's beaches. It's such an absurd number that it's hard to even imagine. So naturally, you'd expect to look at the sky and see it filled with stars. Even the ones that are far away, their light could still reach here, no problem. It might arrive faintly, but with so many stars, the sky should be bright. But that doesn't happen. Not even if pigs fly, we can see only a few thousand stars. If you look with a telescope, you can see a bit more. What you think is a star might actually be 3, or a galaxy far away. But even through a telescope, the sky isn't just packed with stars. And then 2 really cool things happen. First, the universe is about 13 billion years old. So, a star more than 13 billion light years away means its light hasn't had time to reach us yet. So we don't see a ton of stars because their light simply hasn't arrived yet. Or for example, a star that is 5 billion years old but 6 billion light years away, same thing happens. Its light hasn't reached us yet. If the universe were infinite, and if its age were also infinite, those other starlights would have arrived. But here's another complication. The universe is expanding. So, really old stars, whose light took ages to reach us, that light ends up arriving in infrared. A type of light we can't see. That's why some telescopes like James Webb use infrared sensors, because then they can detect light that humans can't see. So in the end, the sky is way brighter than we see, but humans just can't perceive it. Why do we use degrees for angles and temperature? Like 10 degrees Celsius and 90 degrees of angle. What does one thing have to do with the other? Well, nothing. We use the word degrees to divide things into equal parts. Even in school, we have first grade, which is elementary school, and second grade, which is high school. But here on Ibre Responde, I'm not going to give you such a lame answer. What's cool is understanding what motivated people to divide a circle into 360 parts. Why is this here 90 degrees? This division is very old, and we don't know exactly where it came from. But there are 2 clues. The first one is almost obvious. It's the number of days in a year, 365. It's not exactly 360, but it's a good approximation, and maybe back then people didn't know the exact number of days in a year. But the second theory is even cooler. 360 is a very good number for dividing things. When you're designing something on the computer, I do this a lot when I'm doing 3D printing. It's common to have to divide a circle into different parts. Sometimes I have to divide it into 4 parts, or 5 parts, 6 parts, 8 parts, 10 parts. And the good news is that the number 360 can be divided by all of those. You can divide it by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6, by 8, by 9, by 10, by 12. I'm not even going to continue. There are still a lot more numbers. So there's a very good mathematical reason to divide a circle into 360 parts and not around a number like 100, which isn't divisible by 3, for example. For temperature, it's different, much more recent. The person who invented this scale was a Swedish astronomer named Anders Celsius. That's why we call it degrees Celsius. Jansen's behind the camera saying it wasn't several Celsius, just one guy whose name was Celsius. Anyway, what Celsius proposed was, let's take the temperature of water freezing and boiling. That is, when liquid water turns into ice and when liquid water turns into vapor, and divide the distance between those two temperatures into 100 parts. That's also why we call them centigrade degrees. Centigrade is another way to say Celsius degrees, but it's not used much anymore. And that's where this idea of degrees comes from. Natural phenomena. Does donkey milk exist? I don't know if this question came from that episode of the Mexican show El Chavo del Ocho stuck in my head. But there's a scene where Don Ramon is doing some construction work, and there's a box in front of him with some white liquid. And Chavo has a glass of milk in one hand, and in the other, he grabbed that liquid, I think it's plaster, and he gives it to Doña Florinda saying it was from Don Ramon. Then she drinks the plaster and goes to hit him. This question is really cool because the animal burra, female donkey, isn't very well defined. It could mean 2 different things. First, it could be the female of an ass. So ass, donkey, burro. All those are small animals used a lot in Brazil, especially in the northeast. It's like donkey from Shrek. And the second animal we also call burro or burra is the hybrid between a donkey and a horse, which is a bit stronger. It's a mix between donkey and horse, basically a stronger donkey. That first one, a donkey, ass, whatever, yes, it produces milk, and there's a cheese made from it that is super expensive. The Pule cheese made from donkey milk can sell for 1,200 euros per kilo. If Chavo had known that, he wouldn't have drunk Don Ramon's donkey milk. One reason it's so expensive is that the animal produces very little milk. They say, for example, that Cleopatra liked to bathe in donkey milk, but she needed around 700 donkeys to fill her bathtub. But if we're talking about the other animal, the hybrid of a horse and a donkey, you get a female called a mule. And generally this animal is infertile. When it mates, it doesn't produce offspring. The mule doesn't get pregnant. But sort of rarely it happens that a mule can have a foal. And then it's a mammal, it will produce milk. So in that case, mule milk would be even rarer than regular donkey milk, but it's something practically non-existent. How was the first ruler in history made? Where did they find something so straight in nature as a guide? It's actually really simple to get a perfectly straight line using everyday things. Check it out. 2 nails and a string. You don't even need the nails really. Just tie a string somewhere and stretch it. It stays perfectly straight. Ebere, that's straight, sure, but it's not horizontal. Something can be straight and still slanted, like at an angle. If I want to build a wall that's really straight, that won't help. If you want a wall that's exactly horizontal, you also use this tool here. It's a hose. Check this out. I'm adding some blue dye to the water just to make it easier to see, but you don't need to. Then you just pour this water into the hose. The surface of the water at both ends of the hose is exactly the same height. And what's coolest is that if I move the hose around, the water level doesn't change. It stays in the same spot. So I know those 2 points are exactly level. If I want to build a wall, I just take this long hose, one end on one side of the wall, the other on the opposite side. Then I mark the water level. On a board, for example, or a post, you have to do this on both sides. Then above that mark, I tie a string, and that string will be perfectly horizontal. But Ibere, you can build a wall that's perfectly horizontal, but it could still be crooked. Like, not exactly vertical. That wall could still be off. So to make things truly vertical, there's another tool that's just as simple as everything I've shown. It's called a plumb line. And it's basically a string with a weight hanging at the end. That string will hang exactly vertical. There's a detail in the plumb line. The distance from the string to the end of the wood is the same as the distance from the center of the weight to its end. That helps when making the measurement. So when I place it here, for example, if there's space behind the weight, that means the wall isn't perfectly vertical, which is actually the case. So it's leaning forward a bit. If fish extract oxygen from water, why don't they generate hydrogen? Makes sense, right? Water molecules are H2O. They contain hydrogen. If oxygen is removed, shouldn't hydrogen be left behind? Fish should be like hydrogen machines, but the problem is they don't extract oxygen from the water molecules themselves. They extract actual oxygen gas, the same one in our air, which can sometimes be dissolved in the water. If you stir water a lot and mix it with air, some of that oxygen from the air gets trapped among the water molecules. In other words, O2 molecules get mixed in with H2O molecules. And it's the O2 molecules that the fish can extract with their gills. That's also why in an aquarium, you need to keep bubbling air into the water to renew its oxygen. Otherwise, the fish could drown in its own tank. Now, let's go back to that macabre question from the beginning of the video. You've probably heard about it, right? That when someone dies, if you look at the body a while later, the nails look longer, and so does the hair. And many people think that's because nails and hair grow after death. But they don't. It's an optical illusion. When we die, our body dehydrates and loses water. So the skin retracts and it shrinks. And your nails, if you look closely, part of them is under the skin. So if the finger skin shrinks, it looks like the nail grew. But actually, it's just exposing a part of the nail that was hidden. The same thing happens with body hair and head hair. There's a bit of it still under the skin. When the skin shrinks, that part pops out. With beards, for example, it's very easy to notice. And when I first read this, I thought, okay, maybe after someone dies, the cells still reproduce for a while. Maybe there's some kind of activity still going on in the body after death. But no, that's really hard to happen because blood is no longer circulating. And it's blood that carries energy to cells. So for a cell to reproduce, it needs energy. It needs blood flowing through it. That's why if our heart stops, or if we stop breathing, our body doesn't last. We die very quickly, in just a few minutes, because cells get no nutrients. The video's not over yet. There's one more question. This one came from the Clip channel. Look, Ibre, I'm 13 years old. It's always been my dream to have you answer my question. Here I am answering, because there's no such thing as a silly question. Why isn't there a cure for cancer? Was there ever a supposed cure that turned out to be ineffective? Let's do this. I'll answer that one over on the Clip channel. If you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. We're posting a lot of cool stuff there. It's a channel that's almost hitting 150,000 subscribers. It's doing really well. I think people are enjoying it. Go check it out. It's pretty awesome. I'll answer it over there. Deal?